After 4 months of slacking around, I decided to get serious in my movie watching in May. Although the Maltese Falcon was golden and I enjoyed Midnight in Paris, I was not anywhere near close to reaching 100 films by the end of the year. So I remembered I could download titles to a Kindle Fire and off I went. 16 titles seen by the 31st, going to such places as Atlanta, Cairo, New York City, Albania, Montreal, China, upstate New York, California, the French countryside, Rhode Island, Japan, and not one but two different road trips across the United States. We kick things off in a bad tier with three titles. Sabotage is a film that wants to combine Reservoir Dogs with Training Day, but the end result's more like a bad thriller mixed in with a hyper-masculine action film. With characters named Tripod, Grinder, Monster, and Breach, it's probably too much to expect subtlety in characterization, but would it have killed the filmmakers to make the mystery not rely so much on plot holes and stupidity? Outside of some good gunfights, Arnold, Olivia Williams, and Joe Manganiello are stuck supporting a bad movie with some twists that insult your intelligence and enough gore and F-bombs that blatantly scream I'm an R-rated film. The suit is Let's Be Cops Cairo. Two losers dress up as cops when they get the information wrong at a party, but they like the reactions that other people give them, so they decide to keep up the charade, at least until they get mixed up with a Spanish assassin who's nobody's seen, except of course for those two who have seen him not knowing who he is. It's dumb, and there are some technical issues out there as well, like for example a wedding scene that looked like somebody forgot how to do close-ups, but the romance between the lead and this girl is surprisingly chaste, reminding me of Bollywood, and some of the humor does hit. But there's also a couple running jokes involving the other guy's butt getting shot at that don't quite hit their mark. Two films in, and I don't get Eliza Hedman. Her first film, A Lot Like Glove, had an interesting perspective of a female coming-of-age film, but bad acting and refusing to dive beneath the surface left it far off the mark. Now with Beach Rats, it's a male perspective whose lead character is struggling to understand his sexuality. Harris Dickinson has a charisma that keeps you watching, and the cinematography is solid, but the writing lets the film down again, as it's as shallow as the male characters. Which brings us to the below average tier, and I'm about to lose some of you. Uncut Gems had its moments. The Safdie brothers did a good job placing you in a sweaty, low-rent New York City. There's some good performances out there from people like Lakeith Stanfield as a hustler who draws celebrities and athletes, to Howard, a diamond store owner, deep in debt due to a gambling problem, and Eric Bogosian, who is a loan shark who also happens to be his brother-in-law. But when I mention good performances, you note that I did not say Adam Sandler. As one character says of Howard, he's very annoying. And his voice work here, unfortunately, reminded me a little bit too much of Little Nicky. Tellingly, it seems like he does better with less talented actors like Julia Fox, Kevin Garnett, and The Weeknd, than with pros like Stanfield, Bogosian, Idina Menzel, and Judd Hirsch. If you want a story of a hard-like character facing tough odds, might I recommend Norman instead? Under the It's Okay, I Guess tier, we have four entries. Sonic is a film, I guess. Although they did do a major graphical overhaul in the hopes of making the first video game movie to succeed. Too bad they didn't use the same care as the script. Although James Marsden is used to this sort of thing by now, Hop, and Tika Sumpter is likable, Sonic the Hedgehog never feels like it's allowed to run free and truly take off. Instead, he's stuck in a buddy road trip we've seen many times before, with the speed being used as punchline at times. Jim Carrey tries the joke scatter thing he's done since Ace Ventura, where a few of them land, but too many didn't, including the last one where they try several times and, you guessed it, fail each and every last time. Father Soul Dividend is basically Father of the Bride Part 2. Spencer Tracy feels like he's too good for the material as the family anchor who learns that, yeah, he's about to become a grandpa. There's some familiarity to the story, but the family dynamic does feel just about right. Having said it, director Vincent Minnelli doesn't really add a lot to this by the number sequel, and the laughs are a little bit too scattered. A couple of things that could have made this pay off to a better extent never happened, like, for example, the birth of the baby. Not sure why they made a big to do about it in one scene and then not pay it off later on. And that ending did leave me a bit cold. Open Door was a 2021 Albanian entry for Best International Picture. A story of two sisters who go on a road trip to their father while trying to solve how to pull off telling him about the younger sister's pregnancy. And yes, you guessed it, she's not married. She comes up with a plan to convince a classmate to pretend to be her boyfriend to make everything work out. The chemistry between leads Luli Beatrice and Jonida Vakshi works, and the Albanian scenery is nice to look at. But the narrative's a little bit messy, with significant things happening off screen, which would be fine if this, except this one could have easily put it in Open Door because it was all of 80 minutes. Time. Deco wants to be the millennial answer to E.T. and the Goonies. The main character is a YouTuber, and I'm not salty at all that he has more views for his videos than I do. He, along with his two best friends and a girl, head outdoors on their last night prior to moving to find out why phone signals are messed up. The result is a cute mechanical alien and adults who want to stop him and them for reasons that aren't made clear. Outside of one scene involving a semi-trailer being taken apart and put back together, this never rises above barely okay. Now, we're in the above average tier where I can at least give it marginal recommendations with 4 titles. Now, we're in the above average tier where I can at least give it marginal recommendations with 4 titles. Time of Death is perfectly reasonable as a detective mystery, albeit one that was made for TV. There's enough intrigue to keep it going, the leads have good enough chemistry, and the explanation behind everything that was going on was solid enough. But 2 things keep me from fully recommending it. One is they try to pass off Montreal as Baltimore. No film, I don't buy it for 1 second. The other thing is the fact that they decided to try to force wrap this thing up around the 90-minute mark. Had they given another 5 to 10 minutes to come to a better conclusion, I think I would be higher in it than I was. Fu Panda 3 is a passable end to what I presume is a trilogy. The spirit realm scenes are well done, and it makes the humor and heart still work just fine. The voice acting from veterans and from newcomers is nicely done, and the messages this film has make sense and hold true today. But the film spends too much time on the Panda Village and not enough with the other characters Poe has befriended over the years, like Master Shifu in The Furious 5. The villain feels like he's too often pushed in the background as well. I think it's kind of telling that they keep coming up with a joke that I don't know you. I hope you like Imagine Dragons I'm So Sorry. Most of the Hans Zimmer score seems to be variations of that song. House LLC is probably one of the better found footage horror films I've seen. Thanks to some character depth and a solid atmosphere of dread, the film keeps you involved into the final reel. Yes, they even try to explain the cameras. They do well enough, I guess. There are some scenes of people doing stupid stuff even when they should know better, and a few things that seem to defy reason. But it can hold its head high against the cream of the crop films in that subgenre like Wreck and Blair Witch Project. What does Father of the Bride offer that Fathers of a Little Dividend doesn't? For starters, some scenes of physical comedy that work out pretty well, and a Salvador Dali nightmare sequence that's borderline perfection. The things that go wrong with a marriage are more relatable than giving birth to a kid. Although it does go over some familiar, predictable ground, at least Minnelli's able to do some deft staging that puts this one well ahead of the sequel. Now we've reached the good tier. And there's just one title, but hey, it's definitely recommended by me. The fourth place film is The 100-Foot Journey. It's a story of an Indian cook who is able to overcome prejudice and the odds to become a rising French chef. It's a bit familiar at times and kind of skims the surface of some things that might have made for a better film. But thanks to the sure hand of Lasse Hallström and good performances from Helen Mirren and Om Puri, as rival restaurants are a distance of, oh, take a wild guess. It's a solid film that looks as good as the French Indian fusion cooking that's shown on screen. It may not be worth 3 Michelin stars, but there's nothing wrong with a film that gets 2 of them. The top 3 films all receive very good rating from me. They're definitely worth seeking out and watching. My number 3 is The Block Island Sound. I found it a pleasant surprise. As a man struggles to handle his father, who seems to be unresponsive at times, and who tends to go on late night fishing expeditions. When they find a plethora of dead fish and birds, this brings his sister into the mix, who works for the EPA. There's good acting, an atmosphere of dread, and a solid script that does nail the ending. Makes sound a solid investment. I could have probably done with a little bit less from Neville Archambault in the second half. When he starts uttering one word over and over again, it almost feels like it starts to turn to parody. It's still worth your time, and it can be found on Netflix. My number 2 film is Silence. It follows 2 Portuguese priests as they look for a mentor they hear has fallen away from God. But the world of 17th century Japan is a dangerous place, particularly for Christians, considering its leadership has brutal ways to take care of what they perceive as the threat. Although the runtime of 161 minutes is intimidating, the confident direction from Martin Scorsese and strong acting across the board never lets you feel it. There's plenty of food for thought here as you wonder what it takes to survive in this hostile world and what it means to hang on to your faith. The cinematography is strong as well. And the saga of Kichijiro is fascinating even if it does get a bit repetitive at places. You can find Silence on Prime. And the top film that I've seen in May The Mitchells versus the Machines. It's about a family that goes on a cross-country road trip about the same time that the soon-to-be discarded AI takes over an army of cell phones with legs with a plan to take over Earth and leave humans stranded in space. But with free Wi-Fi. Netflix ended up with this one largely because Sony chickened out on placing it in theaters, probably a combination of lack of A-list voice talent and a concept that probably would be considered too original. This avoids the pitfall of topical humor and pop culture moments, instead relying on character interactions and quirks, which should prove to make this more timeless. Although I laughed a lot at this one, I did cry towards the end as well. The margin between the top two is pretty slim, but the end, I'd say this one is just a smidge better. That's what I watched in May. Tell me what you thought was the best and worst film you saw last month. Be sure to subscribe and spread the word. Don't forget to hit the notification bell and the thumbs up button. We'll see you next time here on Tickets Please Reviews, as the ticket booth is now closed.